Right, so this is it. We're finally here. This is the answer. This is the answer to question 3. Discuss Alan's criminal liability for his statement to Boo. We sort out thieves like you. And it might just be worthwhile, if you've got the documents in front of you, well, certainly the question paper and certainly the model answer that I've prepared, which is free on the Law Bank. You just go to free resources and it's one of the bottom 3 documents. Remember, I'm going to be doing this for each question in this series of exams, but it'll only be the answer to this one that will be given out to everybody. You need to be a member of the site to be able to get all of the model answers. So I'm not going to insult your intelligence as ever. I'll allow you to read that scenario through if you're not already familiar with it. We have been talking about it for about 3 videos. And we're going to look at my formula. We're going to put everything together in a very clear exam answer. And I'm going to break it down and then bring it all together in one long answer at the end. Now, I'm armed with a new tool, so we'll have to see whether or not it works, a different pen. But if you remember, we said that we wanted to stick to the IDEA, the IDEA formula. And I stood for identify the offence, D was to define the offence, E and A were to explain and apply the law. So let's start with the I, the identify. Discuss Alan's criminal liability for his statement to Boo. We sort out thieves like you. We have already identified with the use of our harm chart, our level of harm chart, and with the examiner's report and the mark scheme that the offence that we're looking at here is assault. So our opening sentence under I is going to be Alan is liable for the offence of assault. All right, let's see if I can make this work. There you go, not quite. But Alan is liable for the offence of assault. Now, as you will see on the model answer, what I then want you to do is to leave a line. So it very clearly says to the examiner in very clear terms that you have identified the offence. The next thing to do is to go on and define it. And we're all very happy now, I hope, that the definition of assault is found in the common law, and the latest cases were Ireland and Burstow. And in that instance, the judge says that assault is when a person intentionally or recklessly causes another person to apprehend immediate and unlawful personal violence. I tell all of my students, there are some things that you just need to memorise and learn off by heart. And the definitions of offences are one of those things. It will pay you in huge dividends when you're answering papers and later on in life. So please commit to memory the criminal offences. But if you recall, when we looked at the mark scheme, it also asked us to make reference to section 39 of the CJA, and I've done that here. I've said that it's worthy of note that this offence has been established statutorily as common assault, together with but distinct from battery under section 39 of the Criminal Justice Act. So that is in essence our define. We have defined the offence of assault. Those are the easy parts. Now comes the tricky bits. So in the first instance, we're going to look at the E and the A of the actus reus of assault. Now, if you remember, I said I prefer to explain the law and then apply it point by point. And as we work through this, I'm just going to show you how I construct that. So let's have a look. I've written here the actus reus, and then I've abbreviated it to say AR, to say if you're writing it out time and time again, is the apprehension, and then we have immediacy, and then we've got unlawful personal violence. So we've got 3 key areas to consider. But what I've done is I've started the explanation by clearly saying that the nature of the assault can be through mere words, letters, or even silence. And then what I've done is I've said that Ireland, Burstow and Constanza, so Ireland, Burstow and Constanza is the case law that we would use for that. So that essentially is a very quick piece of what would be E. But then what I do is I apply it directly to the scenario. Clearly the threat made by Alan falls within words alone, as distinguished here by Ireland. I've then gone on to talk about the first element of our actus reus, apprehension. And I've said very clearly, apprehension in this sense means expectation and not the fear of violence. You know that that's my soapbox issue. And this is clearly demonstrated in the cases of Lamb and Logden. Now, remember what I said? You do not have to explain what happens in each of the cases in a substantive answer. What you've done is said very clearly what apprehension means, and you've given the cases in which people can find that. That's all you need to do for substantive. And then we go on to apply that. And I say, in the scenario, we are told that Alan used the phrase, "We sought out thieves like you." Now, what that does is that causes Boo to hurry away in a panic. I have used the words of the scenario to prove my point. So in the scenario, we are told that Alan used the phrase, "We sought out thieves like you," which causes Boo to hurry away in a panic. And then I've made a judgment. I've said that this seems wholly in keeping with an apprehension. Why else would Boo have hurried away if she was anything other than apprehending violence? All of that is application, and hugely important, and demonstrates that you are applying the law that you've already explained. I then go on to the next part of the actus reus, which I've said is the issue of immediacy. I've used a piece of case law to explain that, and I've used Smith versus Superintendent Working Police Station, and I've said clearly that immediacy is no longer about instantaneous, but it can mean any time in the near future. I then use more of case law to corroborate that, so I use Ireland, Burstow and Constanza, where delayed threats would also count. And I've made a link to one of those pieces of case law. I've said that the case here is not dissimilar to Smith, as in Smith and Superintendent Working Police Station, in so much as it's not an immediate threat of violence. However, it's fair to assume that the phrase used by Alan is sufficient but for Boo to think that the sorting out is real and likely to take place sooner rather than later. Once again, from the however, well, really from the case here to here is all application. And then the last thing that I say, which I think is worth saying, is that the actus reus states that the violence has to be unlawful. Now, generally by unlawful, we mean not in the course of normal social intercourse, as in the Collins versus Wilcox, in the course of an arrest, self-defense, prevention of crime. And I've just, of course, none of these things apply in this case. So I've very, very briefly said that the scenario fits none of those exceptions, and therefore it doesn't need for us to discuss it any further. And I finish my look at actus reus by saying that Alan's actions are clearly unlawful. So you can see there's a mix of explanation of the law. I take a point of the actus reus, I explain that point, I tell the examiner what piece of case law explains that point, and then I apply that point to the scenario. We see a similar thing then when I look at the mens rea. And in the mens rea, after that, I leave a line break, and then I look at the explanation and application of mens rea. Now, absolutely key when you talk about mens rea, you need to talk about it in two stages. You need to say, how is the specific mens rea for this offence defined? Then you need to go on to say, and has that mens rea manifested itself either in direct intention, indirect intention, or cunning and subjective recklessness? So there's a two-step process. And here I've said the mens rea for assault is stated in savage. All right, and it's stated as an intention to cause the victim to apprehend immediate and unlawful violence or recklessness as to whether such an apprehension be caused. So then what I've gone on to say is that it's our job to determine if Alan has an intention or is reckless. So from here, we then look at the scenario. One could clearly argue that Alan has a direct intent under the Mohan criteria. And I've listed what the Mohan criteria is. Again, a good thing to commit to memory. And I've said that he clearly must have intended that by the very nature of telling Boo he was going to sort out people like you, that he intended the consequence of her believing that. There's nothing in the scenario to tell us otherwise, and I've made a point of saying that. But then what I've done is say that if that's not the case, and we can't prove that, that it must have been true that Alan foresaw the risk that Boo would have apprehended immediate violence from the words that he used, yet he went on to take the risk anyway. So even if the Mohan rule under direct intent doesn't apply, certainly Cunningham's subjective recklessness would. And I've made it clear to say that. Now, if you put all those things together, your answer for, let me just change this pen, but your answer for section 2, let me just change this, sorry. Your answer for question 2 will look like this. I just want to pick up one or two parts. Notice that between every element, I've used a line break. Line break, line break, line break. So this is going to be the I, this is going to be the D, E and A for actus reus, and the explanation and application for mens rea. So the structure of my answer looks clear. Whenever I use case law or statute, I underline it. You'll notice that it's underlined everywhere throughout here. And I think that's very, very clear. It's an old law student trick. It just directs the examiner to look at the case law that you've used to support your answer. And you'll notice throughout, hopefully, that there are bags and bags and bags of application back to the scenario, using things that the scenario says clearly to support your answer. So it's as simple and as straightforward as that. If you've done the work and the preparation, and we've done that by looking at 7 other videos before now, writing an answer like this should be relatively straightforward. Use this as a template, and now the next video we're going to look very quickly at the framework for revision, and then we're going to go on to look at how we answer the question 4, the issue about the paint in Boo's eye.